All right. So, and we're live.
Yeah. Yeah. We haven't gone there yet.
Not yet. All right. So, at this point, hopefully everybody's watched the 4 videos from Simple But Not Easy.
Right.
And they've, gone through the introduction and the relaxation, the fourfold breathing, and the gazing. And now we'll, kind of get into the how to see energy course proper. And so I think, we'll start at the beginning with what do you want and why do you want it? And just kind of go over that in case people haven't gone through the 42 days, because we started with that there. But, I think it's great to just reiterate with anything that this is, step numero uno.
Right.
Yeah.
Quantity goes to quality after a while.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like we just keep repeating certain things, and there's a reason that that's done from a, as a teaching type of tool, right? It's like you keep repeating it, using different analogies, coming at it from different angles, and some people will get one angle and other people will get another, and then finally, even if you've listened to it several times, it's like, all of a sudden you
hear it in
it's
a new
like you
way.
hear it for the first time.
Right.
It makes sense to you.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, now I can reiterate it and move on and apply it, which is the most important thing, right? As far as I'm concerned.
Right.
It's like there are plenty of people that are, have the intellect to understand those things or even tear it apart in a better way. But, how do you practically apply it? How do you put it into practice? How do you do something with it? That's the big deal, which is, sort of my first and foremost thing.
And the doing here is actually not just sitting down to contemplate what you want and why you want it, but to write those things out.
Yeah. I mean, contemplation is a stage in analysis, that's more toward the end, right? Where it's like, you're sort of you've written out as much as you can, and your information and understanding of the principles and what you're doing, but then, you sort of let it rest in your mind. It's kind of like you've built the structure in your head of what something is supposed to do, and then you filled in all the information, and then in the contemplation process, it's sort of, your subconscious is sort of rearranging things to sort of fill out the form of that thing, right? So, but that's at an end stage, right? You've got to get these other parts in place first, and the very first part is, what do you want? And second stage, why do you want it? Those are really, I mean, it's can't overemphasize that.
It's kind of
the very first things you want to put into place.
Yeah. It makes sense, but in some ways it is a little odd, because you'd think that for something like seeing energy, that would be maybe it's almost like, if you want to see energy, it's almost like, how could you not want to? Or it's obvious, like, oh, I want to do this for my healing practice, or I want to be able to see energy to, facilitate whatever, but I think it goes a little bit deeper than that.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe you can just kind of go through that.
Sure. It's so important to start out with a framework that's going to facilitate, moving toward a goal. And, in order to do that, we need to know where we start out, and then, the goal that we choose to go toward first, identifying that. And then, why do we want to go there? It's like, sort of, if I'm here and I need to walk to town, why am I walking there? I mean, it's even if I'm doing walking for exercise, right? It's like to get my body in better shape, or to exercise my body in some way. But if I have an actual goal of going to town, I need to know that, right? So otherwise, the rest of it just doesn't make any sense. And for most people, I think that we do that so automatically with things that, we take something like these practices, or something that's a little bit more amorphous and maybe in some ways more rare, that when we start looking at it, it's really important to establish, where we are right now. Am I just, do I not know this at all? Do I, am I getting little flashes of things, and I always have since a kid, or, all of those things and everything in between, right? So, or I can do it, but I want to make it better or more consistent or whatever it is. So it's sort of, what is it that you actually want, and sort of write it out in detail. You can always, rend it down into a, more concise wording, but, just start with the long form and just put down what it is exactly that you want. And then the most important thing is, why do you want it? You want to get to that underlying idea of, what is it that's driving you to do that? People can say, I just want to do it because it's cool, or, I want to do this just to know if it can be done, or is there anything to it or not? Or, and all these other, everybody's got a different set of ideas of why they want to do something, but it's a really important process to put it down on paper, and really write out your ideas, write out your whys, right? Why are you going to spend time doing this? You're going to have to sacrifice the time from something else, whether it be entertainment, TV, excuse me, or cleaning your house or doing whatever, right? It's like you're going to have to grab the time to do these practices from someplace. And is it an adequate exchange or not? And so, is there, and can I identify my motivating factor? Because as legitimate as it's just cool is, it doesn't seem to have, long legs, meaning, it doesn't, that motivation won't last you very long. As soon as you hit a bump in the road, or it's not coming to fruition in, 5 days, you're ready to pack it in. So I think, for me, really driving down and asking those questions over and over again, and really looking at it, and any questions that come out within my writing is also, I'm asking questions about those things too, if I can't really articulate, my, my true understanding of why it is that me, is wants to do this so badly, and really trying to get to that last line where, you've rendered it down to this funnel, and to this point where it's like, oh, that's the true reason why I'm doing this. And if you can hit that, it makes everything else much, much easier, because it's always your driving goal. When you have that, it's like you set something into motion that says, like, and I am willing to sacrifice, an hour a day, or, whatever, however much time you've delegated toward this, and the tenacity to go after it and get it until you have what it is that you've wanted to do. In this case, seeing, but, it could be almost anything, really. I mean, I can't think of a single thing that I would not want to, if I was trying to use either my physical skills or my mental skills to acquire, I can't think of anything that I wouldn't do this on, to really solidify what it is that I'm trying to achieve, and what I'm willing to sort of, sacrifice in order to balance out the time that I would need to do that, or money, or anything, right? So it's all your resources, because there are sacrifices in all these things, and it seems like it's gotten sort of a bad rap, sacrifice. We sort of put it away in a really kind of tiny area in the back of our heads, but it, it is. There's no way around it, right? We can't do everything all the time, all at once. So, we sacrifice from one area to achieve, time and a goal in another area, or resources toward one thing, and we put the resources towards something else, right? So, and that's that hierarchy of value, right? So it's like I move away from those things that are less valued to me, and more toward the thing that is of a higher value to me. And then, so what is, not just identifying that it's of higher value, but, how much am I, willing to sacrifice to achieve that, desired outcome? And so, and it varies.
Do you feel like going through that process of why do you want it is kind of like negotiating with yourself in a way, because it's like, that you're going to need to, there's going to be times where it's like, I don't feel like practicing right now, or I'm not super jazzed about it, but I know I should because I really want that thing. And So do you feel like it's almost like you're kind of priming the pump to um, to to get through those times when you know you want it, but you're not driven to do the things you know you need to do to get that to happen?
Right. And so, yeah, I do. And, I mean, we'll go over this many times in the course of this program, right? But basically, anytime I have those sensations of like, because it comes to everybody, right? Like, oh, it's like, I should do this. I don't really have the gumption to do it right now. It's like, and I'm always asking myself, why? First of all, I'm not always immediately dragging it to the, like, oh, because you want to be able to do this thing, or you want this thing, or whatever it is. It's like sometimes I'm kind of coming at it from the back door and saying, why do I feel like I don't want to do it right now?
Hmm.
So that I can sort of identify that and change that scenario. Again, it's sort of like that Mel Robbins idea of, the 5-second rule, right? If that comes up, I have 5 seconds to, here's the alternative, and I have 5 seconds to sort of make a direct, make an action toward that goal again. And so I can shift that, pattern basically. Otherwise, the pattern becomes deflection to other things. I've got a headache, I'm too tired, I've got these other things to do, I've got, the list can be endless. So, and you can get trapped in that, and that becomes the new pattern or the new habit, right? So the idea with all of these things is to sort of, you spend a certain amount of time erasing the canvas and then redrawing from a blank.
What do you mean by that?
Well, it's sort of like mixing up not mixing up, that's probably a wrong term, but sort of really analyzing at some point, the patterns that you have that are habitually there, right? I mean, some people would think of that as mindfulness, where you're, paying more attention to the things that you do every day. And for me, a lot of times it's more like that, the castanata idea, where you're basically shifting the patterns of your normal everyday situation, right? From the smallest thing, it really starts from the smallest thing. So, we've discussed this, right? So it's like brushing your teeth with your left hand if you've always done it with your right hand because you're right-handed, right? And so, yeah, it takes a little more, it's not so automatic anymore. You actually have to think about it, One of my favorites is shaving with the other hand, because then you've got real risk there. You've got to pay attention. So, but things like that, changing up your coffee cup, from your favorite to something else that's there, anything else. It doesn't sound like that would make any difference at all. It just seems so insignificant, but it's not, because it changes the pattern. You actually have to think about it. You have to make a decision. You have to think about it. And, so it's sort of like, when I think of it that way, it's sort of like erasing the picture that's on the canvas of your life and saying, okay, I'm going to start over again. Now I need a whole new palette, right? So original colors, so that I can, start drawing in a different picture of what this part of my life is going to look like. And so this is sort of getting rid of the old picture first is kind of it's a good way to start.
Mm-hmm. And this is a practical application of that idea of erasing personal history.
Correct. So, and like I said, I mean, I think most people start off too grand. It's like they want to shift their whole, oh, does that mean I have to get rid of my relationships? Does that mean I have to get rid of this and get rid? They want to like put you in a white square room and start over and build out your whole existence again. And it's like, no. It doesn't take that. It's like, it's so much more subtle than that. And even those subtle things, I think most people who are reasonable and logical would think that wouldn't really have much of an effect on them, other than maybe a little bit of annoyance, especially first thing in the morning when you're rolling out of bed, right? To do something different instead of just go through your routines. But it really does shift many things. We're not always sure of the mechanism, how that's happening, but basically it because you're putting out a different resonance, because you're trying to find little things to adjust over the day, and you're paying more attention to your environment and your surroundings, it starts to bring up more and more differences that you're noticing, and some of those differences will be opportunities that you can take and utilize for toward whatever it is that your goal is at the time. Can you use that as a springboard to get into some other aspect, or are there opportunities there that you didn't see before, and so on and so forth, right? But it starts from all these, just these little tiny things, you know. It's like, again, another one of those things that, you know, that I've often used is like signing your name with your opposite hand. You know, do it 10 times during the day. I mean, it doesn't have to be on anything official, but just taking a piece of paper and having it there and doing that until you're, you know, trying to match it to the right, you know, and just, it takes some effort, right? It takes some concentration, and, you know, you go slow and figure it out, but it's just something different. It starts to, you know, erase habitual, you know, thoughts in your mind. So it leaves you more open to other ideas that might come in.
Well, and I mean, that makes sense, you know, but also, you know, it's like this whole course is going to be filled with a lot of things that we've never done before.
Sure.
So,
Sure.
you know, I'm sure there's an element of that to all these things.
Yeah, I mean, and that's true, but I think that's, you know, what I'm saying may not be different than other people, but at the same time, it bears, you know, reiteration that, yes, these practices may be unique and different, or maybe some the same, but a little more explanation. Hopefully, we've done a good job of trying to bring it, you know, you know, down to earth, so to speak, and you know, in common language rather than something, you know, where you need a special vernacular to figure it out. And but you know, at the same time, one of the things that I've always emphasized to students is that it's not just about those practices, you know, because it's like there's a, you know, let's say 15 or 20 minutes ahead of time that you're ramping up and getting ready to do it. Then you do it for whatever amount of time, and then there's a, you know, kind of that afterglow of like, oh, okay, I've done my practice and I got some results, or I didn't get, you know, whatever, you know, it ends, right? At a certain point, that resonance, you know, at this point maybe doesn't have the legs that you're looking for. But how you can enhance that is by, again, you know, erasing the personal history through the day, because it just makes your energy more mobile. It's not so fixed in this kind of concrete pattern that you've had. Remember, 90% of your thoughts that you had today were thoughts that you had yesterday, and on and on and on back, right? So you really only have that 10% that, you know, if that, I think, you know, probably even less, that's original thought, you know, or just decisions like, oh, I'm going to have lunch at the same time, but, you know, oh, I have a decision of what kind of lunch am I going to have, or whatever. But other than that, everything around it is sort of in concrete, because you're just going rote through the day, right? So 90% of the thoughts that you have today are thoughts that you've had yesterday. So that leaves very little room. But when we start doing these things, what happens is that gets chipped away. So the 90% starts to go down farther and farther. The more that I do these little things, these little actions that are different than what the other one, it sort of makes me wake up in a weird way and say, oh, okay, I have to actually think about this. I have to be awake and aware, and the same pattern isn't there. I can't just like be asleep and go through the day. And so when I mix up this energy, because that's what it is, it's a mixing up of the resonance that's you, then when I go to do these practices, I'm already sort of, I have a lot more of a palette to use, because it's not all, I don't have to chip it out of this granite, you know, personality and try to fit it to what I'm doing now. I've got this energy that's more free floating now, and I can do that, right? It's like, what's easier, you know, taking brand new lumber and building a house, or destroying another house, or trying to take it apart and seeing what you have for pieces to build that new house that you're trying to do. It's like, there's no question, right? It's like the loose lumber that has never actually been utilized for that purpose is going to be a hell of a lot easier to build that with. And the same idea, you know, I mean, we can use other examples like clay or whatever, right? It's like, if you could break a cup down back to its original flexible form, you know, would that be easier to do, or would it be easier just to grab a hunk of clay that has never been made into anything and then form it into what you want?
Right.
You know, it's like you're skipping this whole process. So that's the same thing with us, right? We want this thing that we don't have right now. or it's not as consistent as we want it. So then, I need to use some energy to do that, right? I need to actually put myself into practice with that. So, but, is it easier to break out these concrete pieces and try to form that, into, something else? I mean, there's like a whole nother stage that you don't have to do there. And instead, I sort of start making these pieces more mobile, right? And as I make these pieces more mobile and they're shifting around, they don't really have, a configuration that they're locked into anymore. And so now I direct that into this new practice, and that actually opens it up a lot more, gives it a lot more legs with that. So, and if we do that consistently through the days, it's funny. I think, there are so many fears around doing those things, like, oh, I won't be as efficient because, I'm going to be changing things around. It's not, it's not this rote pattern, so I can just go through it without thinking about it. But it actually, one of the things that it does is it makes you more creative, right? Because you have to actually think about things, and the energy isn't just fixed into the state, right? You actually have to, things come up because opportunities for work come up because you have more energy that's looking to fill a pattern, looking to fill sort of a structure, like water, right? It's looking to fill, by itself, left to its own devices, it's very fluid and moving around all over the place, right? But once you give it a vessel to fill, it takes the form of the vessel. So it's the same idea, right? It's like, but take a ice cube and try to make it fit in a shot glass. Is there's force, and you could break the glass, or you could break the ice, or do any of that stuff. So these opportunities seem to it's like the energy almost wants to fill a form, but so when it's in that flexible, when you've mobilized it, it's looking for a new form. It's looking for your direction to give it, the form to fill.
But I mean, the other thing to acknowledge, I think, about that is that, at this point, depending on how many times a day we're used to doing things that are different, whether we've made erasing personal history like that and changing little things about our routines or not, it's like we may be in a whirlpool of habit, and that whirlpool may be stronger for some and less strong for others. But regardless, it's like, it's going to take energy to interrupt ourselves, whether to do something,
Sure.
to do, so it's like, so, again, is part of doing the what do you want and why do I want it? It's like anchoring more deeply in consciousness that thing that you want, so that you'll get those moments of clarity throughout the day to give yourself the opportunity to do something a little differently, or bring your attention somewhere else, perhaps, or to one of these practices, or even just to change something or whatever. Because it's like, yeah, it seems small, and yeah, the idea, it's to grasp the idea, like you're saying, about warming up your energy, making it more flexible, so that then when you go to do these practices, you're already kind of in that warmed up, flexible state. It's like, yeah, that's a really nice idea. But at the same time, it's amazing how much we can find ourselves asleep again throughout the day, or just not even asleep, but just unconscious, or not even unconscious. It's just, there's a part of us that knows that, like, it's going to require a certain quotient of energy to even change the glass that I'm drinking my coffee out of, or like you said, so just for just as an exercise, sit down and take a scrap piece of paper and sign my name with my left hand to do that. It's just like, there's a part of your brain that knows, yeah, that's very stingy about your use of energy, right? That's going to say, like, how important is that really? Because I got a lot of other shit going on that I need to take care of, and survival's one of them, especially if you're in that survival mode. So it's like that stingy part of your brain that's determining how much energy it's going to allow you to direct towards these things. It's like, that's what I was getting at with it's like almost like negotiating with that part of you that's controlling how much you get for those things.
Right.
you know.
Right, and that's why I say start small, because everything starts
Mm.
with a very tiny, sort of expression. Like people, if you said you've got to erase everything that you do in the day and do it all differently, people would be so overwhelmed. Nobody would ever be able to do that except the most austere, person that would just be like, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to map this all out. I'm just going to go through this, and it's like, but there aren't many, so it's like, why?
And not because there's something super special about that, but more
No,
like there's
it's the
very few people that
pattern.
have that level of motivation. And usually we see it with people that have some major trauma or catharsis or whatever. They're like, I'm gonna complete, I'm taking
Yeah,
this
yeah, yeah.
100%. I'm changing everything right now.
Right,
You know.
right. There's quite a gap for most people between something that you have to do, or you feel that you have to do, you're super motivated to do, like you get a horrible diagnosis and now it's like you're all about like eating clean, doing the meditations, doing, like all of these things. You're religious about it, and it's like, but that's not the time to do it. I'm not saying everybody has to be in that zone, but I mean, it's an alternative, right?
Right.
To do it prior to anything like that happening, meaning that, and most likely it probably won't come up if that's the case, and you've taken that time to do those things and make a lifestyle like that, whatever that is. So, uh, I think that starting off small, it's not about assuming that people are weak or that people can't do it. It's knowing that those patterns, we're patterning creatures, right? We're even even that energetic resonance that we have, that we changes over the course of the day, even moment to moment, right? But it sort of keeps us in this configuration at this point. You know, any shift from that, the part of you goes like, just like you said, the body will go like, whoa, wait a second. The conscious mind will go like, wait. It's like you're coloring outside the lines now, and I don't like that. And so but it's like, instead it's like, well, why don't we change the lines first? Like just this one segment. Like, I'd rather see the picture look like this over here. And it's like, oh, well, I guess if it's on the side, that'll be okay, that little bit. It's still going to be like, there's going to be some resistance there. Anything that you do that changes the pattern is going to meet with some kind of resistance. And, if that's the case, then why do you have to do it so huge right from the beginning? I mean, it's like, it's just going to throw you into catharsis, and it's going to be, much more likely that you're going to give up the practices, or going to give up the desire for what it is that you're trying to achieve, because it's just, you've thrown yourself into a chaotic world, right? That's of your own creation, whether you know it or not, right? So that it's, it's like a tornado at that point, or a hurricane, right? It's a force of nature. It just seems like your whole world's being turned upside down to one degree or another, whether it's work or family or relationships. And we can't always, at this stage, pull back and see this larger view, right? Bird's eye view, where I'm not as emotionally attached to it, but I can objectively see, is there a way that changing these few little things over here, has produced this effect? Well, it's looking for a new pattern to settle into. If you've disrupted the pattern that much, knowing that it absolutely needs a pattern, well, it's going to search all around in order to find that new pattern. And if you don't give it one, somebody else will give one to you. So that's why that what do you want and why do you want it is so important, right? So it's like you're really getting to the heart of the matter of, what is driving you to be there, and here's the new pattern that I'm looking for. And so if I already have that in my mind when I'm doing these things, and then once that energy is activated, can I then, put it into practice with this, this new thing, whatever it is,
Right.
and build this new pattern out. And so,
So it's
I think for most people, that's the way to go. You
yeah.
don't need to throw yourself into, complete chaos in order to do this.
Yeah.
I mean, there will be things that will change no matter what you do. Doesn't matter. The smallest change will sort of upset the apple cart, but not to the degree where every apple falls off. That's just a recipe for catastrophe, right? So,
Right. 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 Yeah, it's interesting. It's like, on the one hand, going through the why do you want it and everything, right, is a way of, getting hyper focused so that you can utilize your free energy, to do these things and move you toward this goal of seeing energy, and mustering up the clarity, and the true the motivation that has the true legs to carry you through the work to get you there. But it's interesting that you're talking about kind of combining that with this idea of personal history, because as you're describing it, it's almost like every time you take the opportunity to do one of those little things, it's almost like you're reclaiming this small quotient of energy. So you're not only just, focusing your free energy through knowing why you want it so clearly, and what you're focused on, but you're also acquiring small amounts of energy, and just, grabbing and be like, oh, I can get a little quotient here. I can get a little bit here, and I can get a little bit from that too, and
it's kind of like energetic recycling.
yeah. Yeah, yeah.
In a way. So yeah, I'm
That's a really
gathering
cool
momentum
idea.
to do that. I need to do that because it's because everybody's busy.
Yeah.
Everybody feels tired, and like they feel like a lot of people feel like they can't take on one more thing. So you have to start looking for these places where, first of all, you need to know that you can change something, and just doing these small things, these small erasure of patterns will actually, sort of redirect that energy, or put it into, a bin that I can then utilize later to pull out and say, oh, look, I've got all this extra clay that I've put together, and now I've got a mound of clay that I can actually make a new cup out of.
Right.
And so, it's a, it's a, it's a, it is a big deal to, reclaim that stuff, the small little pieces, and and to be able to put it into a new project, right? It's like,
I
if you
think
ask entrepreneurs and things like, people in business, it's like, one of the biggest things that they, is not finance or those types of things, right? It's like, it's, you know, the energy to do things and the time to make it happen,
right.
right? They only have so many hours in the day. And if most of them are filled, which most people, the time period is filled, right? So, if we just, I know this isn't the truth, but if we say that, okay, you've got 8 hours for sleep, and then you've got 16 waking hours to do whatever in, most people have from point A to B, hour 1 to hour 16 is filled. It can be filled with not just things like work or eating food or family stuff, but it can be, television, doing this, wasting time, distractions, all of these things. If you start adding up the minutes in a day that, that's in there, well, there's the amount of energy that you have to expend on certain things like that. And, but also, how do you mobilize that energy? It's not just
Because
like,
it's stuck in that
because it's
pattern.
stuck in that pattern, right?
Right.
So it's like you need to be able to retrieve that, and then funnel it into
Right.
what it is, the new project that you're doing.
The word that comes to mind is power when you're talking about this, because that word, I feel like, has taken on almost a bad taste in my mouth,
Oh, sure.
because it's like, we don't have I feel like for a lot of us, we're kind of losing a sense of what that is and what that actually means, and how to actually practically acquire it. It's not like a pumping ourselves up or becoming powerful over others or over a situation,
Right.
or but you know associating it's odd to associate the idea of power with using your left hand to brush your teeth, or just these tiny little things, or whatever.
Well, because you're exercising your will to do something that's, first of all, can you observe that situation coming up? Like there were plenty of times in the beginning where I was like, I was in a rush or whatever, and I immediately went to the right hand and started, and then I was like, oh, caught myself. It's like, oh, all right. That's where, all of these things that we do, they give us clues into ourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's like, oh, when I'm rushed like this, I revert back to my normal patterns, even though I've been trying to interrupt that one for a while. It's like, oh, here's a tense situation, or that I interpret as a tense situation. I'm in a rush, I'm late, or whatever it is. I've really got to get this done. I don't just bypass it and immediately, instead of like, oh, I don't have time to do that, when it doesn't take any longer to do it the other way.
Do it a little differently.
Change
one little thing.
Yeah, one little thing, and it's like
amazing,
it's
because
amazing.
we're even for even having for us who've watched the videos on let's say gazing or whatever, and talking about the oddness of moving into that stage of where your vision's changing to a flat screen, or maybe where it's starting to move and shift a little bit, right?
Sure.
And so that's a very cool idea. It's a very exciting, novel thing. And but it's like, if you're not comfortable doing one little thing differently, right?
Yeah.
Then how much more uncomfortable do we think that experience is going to be, and do we think that we're going to have the stability of mind, or the strength of will, or the whatever it takes to remain relaxed in those states, without, it's just, I think it's very clarifying to put it in those terms, to contrast those two things and say, look, there's really not a huge difference in the nature of like how mentally you're going to experience these things, because both brushing your teeth with your hand that you're not used to falls into the category of different or unknown, in the same way that gazing through these different stages is as well. So it's like they're also like warm-ups, right? Or not, or
Right. It's breaking the pattern.
Yeah. And I think just as much as it's important to accumulate the motivation and the strength of will through knowing what you want deeply and why you want it and all that, it's like making those associations that I feel like are important too, because if you don't really truly believe that doing something small like that is actually going to have an impact on your ability to see, then you're not going to be motivated to do it. Or you may be for a day or two, but that won't have legs.
Right. Once the novelty wears off, then it's sort of like,
it's not, because it's too, it's like I feel like, if anybody's read about that, the limbic system, right, of your brain, right. It's like that limbic system has a huge amount of control over how much energy goes to the frontal lobe of your brain, which is what we're talking about using.
Right.
You're going to use that part of you that's more self-aware, consciously thinking about what you're doing, and it's like you don't get the energy that it takes to do even that small little thing unless you can give me a really good reason why.
Right.
I'm not going to give it to you because my job is, like we were talking about, is to keep you alive, to keep you safe, and I know that your normal patterns are safe. And there ain't no good reason for me to give you this little bit of energy to sign your name with your left hand. What are you doing?
Right.
What are you doing right now, Bri?
Yeah.
You got bills to pay. You got kids to take care of.
Exactly.
This is ridiculous.
Right. And don't forget that it's the allocation of energy, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, anytime you go on autopilot,
efficiency goes up
because energy
use of energy goes down.
Goes down, right? So it's like it's all about saving it for the time when you might need it.
Right.
Right. So, and you'll see if you do a few of these things, another one of those funny phenomena is that some people will get, really jazzed up by it, and just those few little things, they'll sort of recover a lot of energy. They'll feel a little bit different.
Ooh,
Just
I
from
just did something.
right, and even the novelty alone will sort of make them a little bit more up, right?
Right.
But there are other people that'll be totally exhausted by the end of the day.
Mm.
Just doing those few couple little things. It hasn't changed their work pattern or anything else. It's just sort of putting those few things in there and having to actually think about it. You'll see that, their energy level, they feel more exhausted, at the end of the day, just because they've taken the plane off autopilot. Just for those few minutes, several times a day, it's enough to say, oh God, now we have an added expenditure of fuel for this amount of time. Well, where are we going to recoup that? Well, we're going to make them more tired earlier on in the evening so that they can go to bed earlier, so that we can, regain the amount of energy in the fuel tanks that we need. And so it's just the whole thing is quite odd, when we look at it from those standpoints, and that something so small could have such a profound effect on people. But it does over and over again. It's an amazing thing. So you don't have to do, the long and the short of it, you don't have to do something, overly dramatic. You don't have to chuck everybody to the curb and, get a new job and, move to a different state or God knows what. So, it doesn't take all of that. Very tiny things will actually amount to much more, and they will be less cathartic, but it doesn't mean that things won't change around you when you do that, because you're basically erasing little tiny pieces of the pattern, right? So that, and now you can color outside because there's no line there. So those things will sort of branch out more and, produce different effects. And we interpret a lot of things that aren't, sort of unconscious for us or rote, sort of going through the motions. We interpret them as not being comfortable, right? So they're unfamiliar, and so that sort of gives us a little bit of a hypervigilance, almost an edge to us, like, oh, okay, things are shifting, things are changing. It's not really comfortable. Maybe this isn't a good thing for me, or, all of these things go through my head, and, maybe this isn't a good thing for me just means it's not familiar. It's not something that I've done on autopilot for a long time. I actually have to take the plane out of that mode and drive it and make it go where I want it to go.
Right.
And so, again, doing those little tiny increments will do that. It's just not as dramatic as it would be if you did something really radical.
Yeah.
So, which there's no reason to do.
Right.
Those things will come up.
Yeah.
So, no reason to, instigate them right from the beginning. It's just, that's a recipe for disaster, really.
Yeah. So, to wrap it up, can we just maybe reiterate the exercise itself of what do you want and why do you want it, just so we're super clear on sitting down and doing that, and yeah, and then also I was going to ask you to just maybe give us a few more examples of little imbibing opportunities for erasing personal history.
Oh, sure. So again, the first thing you want to do once you have a goal or something that you want that you don't have right now, obviously.
In this case, seeing.
You want to write out clearly what it is that you want, all the parameters, and if you can, you can do it long form, right? So it doesn't have to be a single sentence. You can just do it as much as you need to write down. Try to hit all the angles that you can think of at that time, and then, if you want to shorten it and sort of revise it and make it more concise, then you do that, right? So that's usually the easier part for people, especially if they're already doing this and they know that they're going toward that goal. So it's not like just open-ended, what do you want? It's sort of like asking a kid, like, what do you want? What are you going to do with your life? And they don't know. I can't tell you how many adults tell me they don't know. So it's, but let's say we have a goal, and so we're going to go toward that, but we just want to write out, what it is. What does that look like to you? What does the end result look like to you? How do you see these things in your mind? And either from discussions with other people or things you've read or watched or whatever. And so flesh it out, try to figure out exactly, give it some edges so that you're going to fill in that picture, basically. And your subconscious is the one that's going to fill that in. So, get it pretty concise, make it as good a picture as you can, so that there's nothing left open for the most part. And then why do you want it? So you're looking, the root of that is to find, ask questions about that, and write out why you think you desire to do that, and really get it down to the point where it's the key motivation for you moving forward. And that's it. I mean, it's a much that's usually the longer part of it. I've seen people do it in as little as a few days, and I've had times myself when I've done it over the course of 30 days because I really wanted to get to that last, that one nugget of, this is why, and that's it, the motivating factor.
So every time you ask yourself that question, of why, you just write down what the first thing that pops into your head, basically.
Yeah.
You write it out, you start to clarify it, and then as those things get written down, then you ask why again, right? It's that why.
Right. And, you might even, as you write it out, you might say, oh, that's an interesting thing to write out. Almost like you weren't really sure where that was going to go. And that happens many times. And then, so you'll be asking questions about what you've written down. And so it's just sort of this dialoguing, and always toward that end of like, okay, I really want to clarify what's my motivation for, because it's a motivation for sacrificing one thing to get another thing, right?
Right.
It's not just adding something in.
Right.
So it's like there's going to be sacrifice. And so, do you have the motive, what's an adequate exchange? 1 hour of time a day, 3 hours of time a day, all my spare time in a day, or 5 minutes a day. What is an adequate exchange for the end result that you want? And so it's good to figure that out ahead of time, because you can, obviously you can save yourself a crap load of time if you come to the end of it and you're like, I'm not willing to do that.
Right.
Or you come to the realization that, like, wow, this is not only my motivation for this, but wow, that was a motivation for many things in my life, why I chose certain things, why I did certain things, and it was never apparent to me, that was sort of at the core of my motivation for where I am now. So, and those are real aha moments, right? Because once you realize that, well, it's like things start to you've really shifted a lot, and things start to take on a different shape, right?
And so you've freed up an enormous amount of energy.
Because it's all, a lot of the why is about knowing yourself, right? It's not just a motivation, we sort of give it a name, but it's really about self-analysis almost. What is it that's causing you to move in that direction?
I think that's a really important point, because I was talking about this with a friend of mine, and he was saying, how do I know when I'm not just like going in circles and psychoanalyzing myself, or whatever? And listening to you now, I realized that there's two different approaches you can take when you're doing the why. One approach to doing the why is trying to discredit your own motivations, and and a different way of approaching it is just trying to find out the real thing, with more of an attitude of like, I just really want to know, so that I can know, and so I can be aware of it, not so that I can say that's not a good, that's stupid, that's not valuable, that's
right.
Because you can basically, if you decide to take the devil's advocate position with yourself and your own motivations, you can basically just take yourself apart and just be like, that's not a good reason, that's not a good reason. You could say that about pretty much anything you choose to,
Sure.
So it's kind of you can take the negative approach or the positive approach. And, I remember at one point I was doing this exercise, and I realized that as I was doing it, that the point wasn't to, do that, it was more just like, I needed to know why and to be good with it.
Right.
And just to be able to look at that, to know that that's the truth, to feel deeply in that moment, like, oh wow, that is it, and then just be like, that's okay. Like that's okay.
Right. I mean, it sort of dovetails into the idea of non-judgment, But a lot of people, they're always thinking of that as an exterior type of thing.
Right.
But the real action of that is interior, right? So it's like, I can't really be non-judgmental of other people if I'm still judgmental about myself.
Right.
So it's part of knowing yourself and going through those exercises to do that. And this is one of them, to really sort of dialogue with the internal part of yourself, so to speak. So it's almost like a dialogue between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. And the subconscious mind, sort of pulls up these thoughts and, sort of sends them light speed into the conscious mind, and just a fleeting idea at first. And then if you're quick enough to grab it, it's like,
And write it down.
Yeah. It's sort of like, oh, what about this? It's like, and as you write more down about it, it's like, oh, what about that? It's like, and so it starts to become this real expose into your, motivation for your life. And, and getting into, deeper crevices of you, so that you can understand those deep motivations. And there's no judgment there, right? It's like, I have so many people that have done this exercise, and they really resist doing this part for any extended period of time, because it's unearthing parts of them that they haven't, really engaged with before. And like any work like that, and there's multiple ways to do that, obviously, that, it's sort of, it can be startling, right? Like, oh my God, I've been doing this my whole life because I'm looking for approval from, whatever, from other people, it doesn't have to be my dad or my mom or whatever, or my brother, it can be for, just general approval. I need outside approval for everything that I do. And it's like, when you have those realizations like that, it's startling, right? Because it's something that was underneath that we never named, right? So because of that, it becomes this amorphous sort of motivating factor or feeling or something that, you're completely unconscious of.
But it's driving.
But it's driving you 24/7. It's not even something that shuts off when you go to sleep. It's internally, rearranging all the pieces, giving you dreams, doing this, doing that, solving problems with that motivating factor, as an instigator of that, right? And so it's all filtered through those things. And, you start to, again, those are those big epiphanies where it's like you start to see this thing spread out into your whole life. And you're going, wow, really? Really? From age 12, from when I first started making some decisions on my own, little things, but it was all about, approval. And you start looking at all those things, and the major ones and the minor ones, right? And you're going, oh my God, after a while, your head's starting to spin. But, integrating that is great, because now, you have that clue, right? So you're constantly looking at the new decisions in your life, not just this, but other things, and saying, why am I doing this? Here's a decision. Here's a potential decision. Why would I do it this way? Why would I do it the other way? Is one good for me and, going toward what I want? Or is it just a knee-jerk reaction for approval or whatever it is, and taking the soft road toward that, So it's like, yeah, it's like that's part of being awake and aware, and using your, exerting your will for you, not for, not to please somebody else, or to, sort of conform or do any of those things, right? You need to know what you want, and then know what the true motivation is for getting there, because that's what's going to fuel your desire, fuel your tenacity to keep going, right? Because it's not a smooth trail. It's hard work. It's like, I know people think a lot of times that it's sort of a frivolous thing. Well, it may be frivolous for somebody, but for other people, it's not. And so, again, that non-judgment, I'm sure there are plenty of things that are very normal out there that I think are frivolous, but that's just me. It's like, it's frivolous for me to do that. So it's not frivolous for the people that are doing it to do that. So it's like, that's what they want to do, then they should be able to do that. As long as they're not hurting anybody else, I'm like, live and let live, and do that, right? So,
I
But
feel like being able to do that and be conscious of those deeper reasons in any given situation or whatever,
mm,
as you kind of get better at it and it becomes more, like knowing yourself better and better, it dissipates a lot of internal conflict, that we experience
a ton.
on a regular basis through different activities that we choose to do or not do or whatever, you know. And those are more places where we lose energy, right?
Right.
Because of those things where we've got one voice yakking at us that we're trying to justify against the voice that's criticizing, about this decision or that decision or whatever. And it's
Right.
like, oh my God.
Yeah, yeah. It's like an internal war that's going on and
Yeah.
sucking up all your
Yeah,
resources,
yeah,
right?
yeah, right,
Because
right,
we know that's what war does, right? It just sucks up tons of resources,
right.
and and you can think about it just the way you stated it. It's basically it's an incongruency, right? Is
Mm,
where you get most of those energy leaks, and you're thinking one thing, you're saying something else, and then you're doing something completely opposite. And, it's like a broken pipe,
right.
right? How are you going to get the water, to get from one place to another? The water being the energy, right? But it's like, if if your pipe is, here's one segment and it's over here, but instead of it being a nice straight line into where it is that you want it to go, there's the thoughts, and then the words are going to be like over here. So, or maybe not quite that far, maybe just a little bit like this, so that only a portion of that energy is getting through that portion of the pipe. And then, your deeds are even a little bit more over, right? And so now when you started with 100%, you're ending up with 2% at
Of
this
your
last pipe of
actual
your actual
energy.
energy going into the thing that you want, because those are not aligned,
And
right?
here's the thing, right? It's like every single exercise that we present in this program to facilitate seeing energy requires energy for you to not just to sit down and do it, but to have the desired effect,
Mm-hmm.
right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's like, and those are all those, you know, I, you know, I know I don't want to beat a dead horse or be the guy that's like, this is important, but it's like, it's almost like in saying it out loud, I'm saying it to myself
Mm-hmm.
because I feel like it's even every single time that I have these conversations with you, it's like, yes, we're putting it on film, we're getting it into a form that people will be able to use for a very long time to come. But at the same time, I'm reminding myself of these things because even as long as I've been doing it or putting focus on these things, it's like I find that it's like I almost can't hear it enough or be reminded of it enough because the force of habit is so strong.
Yeah, it is. It's like a giant whirlpool that wants to continually suck you down and hold, or maybe not suck you down, but hold you in
It doesn't
place.
have negative intent for you.
No,
It's literally just
it's it's just a normal mechanism for us. But we can, in understanding it and realizing it, we can use it to our advantage. It becomes a tool then instead of, something that's a detriment.
right. And good to put it in that context too of like being, learning this new skill of being able to see energy is creating a new habit and, you know, deconstructing other ones.
Yeah, because I mean, look how many times, just to use an analogy from other industries, if we want, it's like, look how many times science has come up with, or industry has come up with huge breakthroughs from some person who just had this wacky idea of doing something completely the opposite or so out of left field compared to the norm that everybody did, that it just, and they didn't know, they didn't even know why they were doing it. They just did it to kind of go through it and say like, well, what would happen if? And all of a sudden these huge discoveries, right? And that's the same thing we're trying to do too. It's like, what would happen if, I took something away from here and, sort of made things a little more mobile and then shifted them and directed them into something else.
What if I tinkered around with my own habits of behavior a little bit?
What would happen? I'd become a different person,
Right.
right? So
What if
that's,
I ask myself these questions,
Right.
what would happen if I did know why I wanted all this thing, and how would that change? How's that gonna mix things around? What results are those gonna produce? I
Right.
wonder what's gonna happen here.
Right. And so there's that other idea, like there's nothing more mobile with your energy than being on not knowing what's going to happen next, right? Because it's like you have to be basically, there's that little bit of, let's say, low level anxiety where it's like you're not sure what's going to happen next. So I sort of have to, spread my energy around to encompass as much as I can, knowing that I can't cover everything that might happen. And so it gives me that little bit of like, the conscious mind is going like, oh, okay, like the limbic brain is sort of kicking in and saying like, oh, all right, like let's be awake and aware to see what's going to happen here because I'm not sure. And it's really a fascinating thing, when we start picking out the pieces and analyzing it and looking at how all this stuff works together, right? It is amazing that it's working with the natural processes of our mind and our, how things work and all of that, but at the same time using it in a different capacity or using it towards something that normally would be considered like we don't need that, show me how to do accounting. So it's like, okay, so this is because with accounting or something like that, right? I'm not picking on accountants, sorry. It's like, we know it's numbers, it's math, it's these principles and these things, right? So we can, it's filling things in blocks, and even if we don't know what it is, we have a general understanding of what it's about. With this stuff, we don't even have that, right? It's just this very cursory, like, A, is it possible? B, I'd like to see it for myself, or, is it real or not? Is it, there's like all of these things, right? Questions. There's all these questions. And so it sort of puts you in this, like, what's going to happen next? It's like going to a great concert, right? What song are they going to do next? Or what's this? And, how are they going to change it for the live event rather than just what I hear on the album every time, or those types of things. So it's like there's that, everybody knows that there's a difference.
Cool. All right. So what were you saying?
Technical snafu.
Yeah. We interrupt this program to bring you...
I did not touch it.
Yeah.
So it's like everybody who enjoys music, which is the majority of people in the world, right? And they've gone from hearing a recording, to it being sort of their favorite band, and then getting the opportunity to see them perform live. And there's such a different energy. No matter how much you love the songs that you've listened to from your home stereo or whatever, going to a live performance is always different, right? There's a different energy to it, right? It's like this really, like, of course it's the crowd too, but it's also like minds enjoying this, performance, and the feedback loop of the performers as well, sort of feeding back with the audience and back again, right? So it kind of builds that up. And I think of, knowing, you have the anticipation of going and enjoying it, but you also have the idea that it's going to be a little bit different. And how is it going to be different? Is it going to be worse? Is it going to be great? Is it going to be whatever, right? And, these practices are like that too. We sort of mobilize our energy to say like, oh, I don't know what's going to happen, but I've got to be hyper vigilant to see what's going to go on here. Oh, and he's also saying I have to relax. Well, how do I balance those two things out? So it's like there are a lot of skills that are, that go into this, but I think that one of the primary things with, again, racing personal history and doing things like that is mobilizing your energy so that, you have more to direct toward that, and, more to keep your awareness up to a different level so that you can, really experience everything, at the time that it's happening, and you have enough wherewithal to sort of make a mental picture of that and then write it down afterwards. So you're sort of compounding that.
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe we can just close with a few other examples of erasing personal history.
Sure. Well, we did the brushing the teeth. We did using a different coffee cup and signing our name. It could be, and again, I like the simple things because it doesn't take anything to do them except remembering to do them.
Right.
And you'll see how hard that is when you start, because
Very difficult.
and just know that that's because those patterns are cemented into you. And so in order to break up that cement a little bit, you have to do small things a little bit differently. So most people will grab the door handles with the same hand. So it's like, do the other hand and see what happens. If you carry a briefcase, carry it in the other hand. It's like all these simple things. You go to, you have something to, you have something to drink in the morning, whether it's coffee or whatever. So you've used a new coffee cup, drink it with pick it up with the other hand. So if you're right-handed, it's usually a right-handed pickup. Now it's a left-handed pickup. If you read, which you should, there's my one little So hold the book in the other hand. Whether you're using a Kindle or a real book, we tend to have these little tiny things that are just cemented patterns that we don't normally think of as being anything, and yet they all matter. It's like it doesn't matter in the for that event. Like, is it going to change the way you interpret the book if you hold it in a different hand? Probably not. But it's like, it's just, again, just taking those little things and mobilizing it so that, you're not having to break down a bunch of systems and a bunch of patterns when you go to do these other things, right? So, because they're going to be different, right? It's like, you're going to need that extra energy to sort of flow into that to get the result back that you're going to do, right? If you were starting a new business, it'd be the same thing, right? If you had a job and you were starting a new business or thinking about starting a new business, you'd be spending hours at night, hopefully, if you really were serious about it. You get home, you have your family time, get the kids to bed, and then you'd be putting a couple hours or more into formulating your plan and working out the details, right? So it's a sacrifice of one area, let's say in that case, maybe entertainment value, to put it towards something you really want to, in the end, not just that you want to do, but you see yourself in that picture of an expanded life in that direction. And so the same thing with this, but we've got to have enough pieces to mobilize to put it into effect. So yeah, so all little things like that. I mean, there's just so many. If you think about, like, just take an hour of your day and think about all the things that you do that are normal, just the normal routine that you would do, and just say, what if I just shifted that a little bit? You don't have to make it dramatic. It doesn't have to be. It's literally like left hand, right hand, do this, do that. It's like, just do anything that will cause you to, sort of come out of that rote droning through the day and make your mind more active and say, okay, I'm going to do this other way. And, and that makes you hyper-focused, even if it's something as benign as, writing your signature with your other hand or something like that. So, but there's just, you'll find there's more of those things in the day than you thought of, because you were unconscious doing them. But once you bring that to light, you'll just see that there's many, many, many things like that during the day that you could, that you could pick up and do differently, and that would mobilize that and sort of release it from that binding, that's keeping it in that place. So, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Easy.
Awesome. All right, man.
All
right. Thank you.
Welcome.
And we'll
move on.
Get on with it.
Get on with it. Go do.
Get on with it.
Go do.